let's talk about the geopolitics itself. In regimes, in nations such as Egypt and Tunisia, for example, apart from anger against authoritarianism, there's also anger with the kind of policies that are being followed by the regimes in terms of strategic closeness with Israel and also closeness with the United States. And that's true of the protests that are happening in Yemen and Bahrain and other places as well. Is there what exactly is the geopolitics in Central Asia there? We know that Russia still has a domineering influence over there, but also we keep reading about the Americans wanting a military base in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan being a pretty close ally of the United States. So what's really happening in the geopolitics?
Well, geopolitics here is extremely critical because all these Central Asian states are located in such a region that they are geopolitically sensitive. They are bordering on Afghanistan, bordering on West Asia, border on Russia, border on China, and border on Pakistan. So it's a very hot zone, as they call it. But at the same time, the geopolitics of the great powers is to try and manipulate these countries. So it impacts the external geopolitics, impacts their internal politics. On the one side, there's the geopolitics of the US, who wants and has bases in Kyrgyzstan. They have a base in Tajikistan. They had a arrangement with Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan earlier, and Turkmenistan tried to be very neutral between Russia and the US so that they could use both whenever it was useful for them. But when there were these color revolutions, they became closer again to Russia because the regime's policy suits the Russian policy. They don't want any intervention and they don't want any democracy movement, which they say is sponsored by Soros Foundation and the West. And they say all these democracy movements are Western NGO sponsored. So they have become, again, they have joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Collective Security Treaty Organization. They say they want to be part of the CIS, peacekeepers, etc. So again, but Russia also has its geopolitics where they say that Central Asia, that's our zone of influence. We don't want the Chinese or the Americans there. So all these countries are balancing each other. China wants its influence, but it's economic influence. And Russia and China do not intervene in the regime politics, which the US does. So Russia and China will not encourage democracy movements. They will give, maybe, they'll have economic agreements, oil, pipeline, energy, etc. Whereas America always has a human rights issue also. So there is this kind of geopolitics in which Pakistan and India are also minor players, in where India has very good relations with all the Central Asian countries. They have cultural centers there. They have links. They're getting uranium from Kazakhstan. They're getting energy from other places, and they have a lot of goodwill because they also don't intervene in the internal politics. And their argument is only by example. India is a democracy. If they want to follow it, well and good, but we are not going to support their democracy movement like the Americans do. So there is that kind of geopolitics, and that Afghanistan especially has an impact because there are routes which the Western military, NATO, ISAF can use because the Pakistan routes are very unsafe. And here the Russians also are supporting this because they want a stable Afghanistan. Earlier from Afghanistan there were two problems, the spillover of the Afghan conflict. One was the spillover of fundamentalist Islam, links with Al-Qaeda militants in the North Caucasus, Chechen fighters, right from Kashmir to the Fatah. They are all linked. They are all literally driving distances. And the other problem was drugs, trafficking. And the third was trafficking in women also. And in this drug trafficking through Central Asia into Russia, 30,000 Russians are dying of drug related abuse. So it's a major problem and they want to see an end to that. And they feel that the Western alliance is not putting enough, and they're focusing too much on the military and not on the human security aspect. And Central Asians are equally concerned on that.
Even China is also slightly concerned with what's happening.
China is concerned because of the political Islam possibilities and the linkages that they have and which they do have.
In places like Egypt and Tunisia, especially in Egypt, the popular opposition for long had been led by the Muslim Brotherhood. In Bahrain and Yemen, the subtext of the protests are also, in Bahrain specifically, the subtext of the protest is that this is a Shia uprising against authoritarian Sunni royal rule. There is there is an Islamic subtext to the protests as well, even if not pronounced, but to some extent. How about Islamization in the Central Asian republics? Is there an Islamic current per se, and how is it acting? Are they organizing oppositional groups to this authoritarian nationalist regimes that are in place now?
Look, I think this is a very important question for two things. One, there are a lot of myths around it, and second, there's a lot of truth around it also. Because wherever there is more repression, who is leading the movements against repression? It's the local mosques. So if you have repression, there's only one structured opposition, and that is coming from religion and political Islam. Because no political parties are allowed, but these are secular regimes now, and it's a fallback from the Soviet period. So of course mosques are allowed, but at the same time the mosques, all this while in Central Asia, have had a very limited role because they are thoroughly secularized society, especially as evident amongst women. And again I've met women and seen all this. They are not Islamic. It's very new to them, that Islamic culture. But because of repression, anyone who's anti-state has only one place to go to, and that is link up with the mosques and the political Islam. Not all mosques are also political, but some definitely are. But they definitely oppose repression. And they see themselves as an alternate because they are also in a game for political power. And for them, therefore, they're saying they are secular and they're also despotic. We are religious and we will not necessarily give you freedom, but we promise you paradise. So come to us. So that is a kind of link. So it is a spiral which can go round, and to stop it, therefore, that is why democratic movements are important. It's important to have a place for political, even left-wing, right-wing, whatever ideological political parties, rather than allow the mosque to become the only opposition. And that is what has happened in some of the places, especially Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, where there are these movements. There is a pan-Turkic movement, which wants a complete, one Central Asia under a Turkic
harkening back to the Ottoman
harking back to
Empire.
the old. Then there's the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which is underground, but is opposing the Niyazov and other regimes. It's been opposing them for a long time. Badi, Mukhmedov, all these people. So the opposition is coming from there, and that is why, and that is where it is dangerous, and they can link up with Al-Qaeda, but especially with the Chechen and North Caucasus fundamentalist and political Islam movements. Like there is this person who calls himself the Amir of the Caucasus. So there are these, and there are a lot of these terror strikes in Caucasus, almost one every day, who link up.
So in essence, you're saying that even though there are cultural specificities, there is a geopolitical differences vis-a-vis West Asia and Central Asia, democracy is an imperative. Yeah.
Democracy is imperative. They must give democratic space. Otherwise, if not now, maybe another 10 years, there would be some kind of regime change. People are not going to. They've had, of course, the independence came to them on a platter, so they didn't have a movement like they did in the breakup of the Soviet Union. But definitely, democracy is a bug which travels very fast, and the younger generation, I think, cannot wait.